Welcome everyone to our class on iyun Gemara. Had to learn the Torah in depth. Where we're holding is we're trying to give a brief introduction and show the method of unpacking the information from the Torah, how we go from the raw text in the Torah, analyze what it says, and from there see what the Mishnah explains to us, and then from there what the Gemara explains about the Mishnah, and from there to the Rishonim, and then to the people who do the halacha, the poskim, and then finally to the achronim, and B'ezras Hashem we'll get to some of the Rosh Yeshivot. The point is to show what is done in each level and how each level unpacks the information and explains more. The Torah really was supposed to be just the written Torah, and everything else was supposed to be handed over orally. But as the generations have decreased in their ability to hold all that information, so more and more of it was written down. So we're going to go, B'ezras Hashem, in this little class through one piece of Torah and try to explain each level of unpacking the information, and until we get down to the final halacha that we do, so we took as an example this question of what does a person have to pay when he damages someone. Just to get our heads back. Now, I must say that we do all this work in a very deep way. Right now, we're just handling it as an introduction. Okay, but we're going to be doing some B'ezras Hashem, some heavy work. So what we will be doing in the following classes is taking the text of the Torah, starting with the text of the Torah itself, which I have put out in front of us digitally. And we're going to start to analyze this text and to see what the Torah itself says and what it doesn't say. And everything it doesn't say is Torah Shabbat Peh. That means that we were explained on Har Sinai all the missing elements. Okay, so we have a halacha. Let's just go to that halacha just to show it to you in Shor that says the following. Here we are. Okay. Yeah. Here's the pasuk. It's Chav Beis Gimel. It says, it says, Ki yavar ish sodeh okerim v'shilach es biro ubir b'stei acher. When a man destroys a field or a vineyard and he sends his animal and it eats from the field of another person, then the law is meitav sedeu meitav karmo yishalem. He has to pay the person he damaged with the best of his land and the best of his field. We brought the Gemara that commented on this this text and explained to us that this law, let me just get it up for us, okay, the Gemara explained to us this law of Meitav, which is here in Shein and Regel. We just read the pasuk, Ubi b'stei acher meitav sedeu meitav yikam Yerushalem. This law actually is extended to 28 different laws of damage. And it's done through what the Gemara explains to us is a Gezerah Shava, a link between two different Pesukim, which says, Tachas Nesini Yishalem Kesef. So, thanks to you, I was able to do the Visio chart and to show how that din, which starts in Shein Regel, spreads to Karen, Bor, man, fire, and down to the 4 Shomrim. Actually, there's 3 here. We'll see that one of them is actually learned from another one, the Shomer Sacher, and then to the Ganav and the Gazlan, 2 types of Ganav, when he pays for the thing that he steals, and when he has to pay 4 or 5 if he's caught with a large animal, and also the Goslan. Okay, all those psukim, which we're going to analyze carefully. I said this is only an overview, just to get us familiarized with what the topic is. All these psukim in the Torah are all going to be linked because they all say the word Yishalem. Okay, so that's the word Yishalem. These are the Shomrim and Geneva, and we said these are Arba Avos Nezikin in our Mishnah, the Shor, the Bor, the Mav, and the Hever. And the Shor in our Mishnah includes the Shein, the Regel, and the Keren, which makes the hitting with the horn, or eating, or walking on, or trampling. The next link, Gezerah Shava, comes from this pasuk in Shor Keren, which says, Shalem Yishalem Hashor Tachas Hashor. So the Gemara explained to us that this word Tachas then is a link to these other damages. Now, by the way, this chart we explained is following Rabbeinu Hananel, because all the Gemara said was that there's a link of Meitav from Shein and Regel through 4 words. Tachas Nesin Yishalem Kesef. It's Rabbeinu Hananel that spells this out. Rashi also spells it out, but I took Rabbeinu Hananel's explanation to do on this chart. Okay, so from this pasuk in Keren, when the shor gores, it says Shalom Yishalem Ashor Tachas Ashor. There, the word Tachas spreads to Tsar, Nezikin, and Onus. When man damages another person, he has to pay for the damage he did and also for the injury he caused. That also is going to have the din of Meitav. When it's always translated into a monetary payment, so he'll have to give the best of his land over there too. And if in a case of rape, he'll also have to pay the father of the young girl money, and if he doesn't have it, he'll be Meitav. There the pasuk says, the man who slept with the girl has to give to the father of the young girl 50 kesef tachas asher ana. A few other words left out, just abbreviated. So here we see the word kesef and tachas, and the word Tachas extends the din of Meitav to Motzi Shem Ra, because there it says V'ansho also Me'es Kesef, Me'eh Kesef, Motzi Shem Ra, when he claims that his wife was not indeed a virgin, he has to pay 100 pieces of money, and that if he doesn't have, he can pay in Meitav. And if he seduces and doesn't rape a woman, he also has to pay shekel yeshekel, and Kesef also includes Shava Kesef. And finally, the last Gezerah Shava moves from onus, which says V'nosana isha shochevima, to these other cases of Ripui and Shevis, because they always say the word Yiten. Yiten shifso rak yerapero urafeh, rak yerapero urafeh. I think it's maybe backwards. Yiten shifto rak Okay, so that Yiten will move it over there. So that's the way that the information, again, is compressed in such a way that 4 little words in the Gemara, which explains that the din meitav spreads to the other pesukim in the Chumash, then have to be expanded to explain how it's done. And there we have the great Rishon Rabbeinu Hananel doing it, and us with Visio just spelling it out and making a nice flow chart. Now, these other cases we will get into, for instance, over here, we said that there's a whole other group of cases which also have the din of meitav, but they're not in the Torah itself. Those cases are called toldot. They have a similar quality that the pasuk in the Torah has, and we're going to generate that through a mamatzino, just like this pasuk that speaks about a ox goring. One has to pay kesef, one has to pay meitav if he's going to give land. So too these toldot of squatting and biting and pushing and biting and squatting and kicking, those toldot which are not written in the Torah will also have that din, because we learned through a hekesh, a mamatzinu, that these are derivatives of this case. And in truth, all these cases are going to have toldot, which that din will also be applicable to. Okay, so I just increase the chart, make it look nice. Okay, so that's basically the situation. We see that this din, which of paying with the best of your land, which is expressly mentioned in one pasuk over here of Shein and Regel, through Gezeres Hashava extends through all these other cases mentioned in the Torah, and they're told us, they're derivatives. We then said that there's a conflict. Let's go here. Again, we're going to do all this very in great depth, but I'd like to just show the overview first, and before we get deeper and deeper into the situation. Where does the conflict arise? The conflict arises that once you spread this law of paying with the best of your land to all the cases of nezikin, of damage in the Torah, you're going to run into a conflict, because the Torah also says in these cases that you can pay with money. Let's show you where that's written. So it says here, this is the Gemara in Daf Zayin Amud Aleph in Baba Kama, and it says that Abaya had a rumia that he asked Rava. A rumia, we learned in Derek Tfunos, is when there's two statements that come into contradiction. So here Abaya found two verses in the Torah that now are going to conflict. What are they? Kasev Meitiv Sedei Meitiv Karmi Yishalom. We just saw that in the case of Shein and Regel, in his Meitiv Sedei Meitiv Karmi Yishalom. And we saw that it spread all over, and Meitiv means that you have to give the best, and only the best, and we're going to have to describe what does best mean. Definitely you can't give your middle and lower properties. So if you have 3 grades of property, you have to give the highest property. Now remember, just as a side note, you're only going to pay for the amount of damage that you did. So if you did $100 worth of damage, you're going to end up paying $100. But the Torah says that if you pay that $100 and you don't want to use cash, but you want to give a person a piece of your land, then you have to give him $100 of your best land. You can't give him $100 of your rocky land, even though it may be a larger surface area. The Torah says, no, you have to give $100 of your best land to the person you damaged. However, we see that there's a conflict, because Abaya points out that In the case of bor, in the case of pit, it said, Kesev Yoshiv Laba'alav. When an animal fell into the pit, that you can pay him with Kesev, and there's an extra word there, Yoshiv Laba'alav. And that we have a brisa. Those were the mishnahs that were included by Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, which are used as explanatory text. And this brisa says that the word Yoshiv, that extra word, comes to tell us you can not only give kesef, but you can give shaveh kesef, l'rabba shaveh kesef, v'afilu subim, even the worst type of shaveh kesef. So Abaya cannot now reconcile these two pesukim, because on one hand, when it came to land, you have to give the best of your land. On the other hand, when it comes to giving metaltalin, that means movables, so you can even give the worst movable you have. Now again, subin is bran, so you're going to give him, if you owe him $100, you're going to give him $100, but he's going to have stacks and stacks of these large bags of bran. Who knows if he wants it, if he needs it, what's he going to do with it? But the Torah says, yes, indeed, you can give him your worst movable that you have. You don't have to give him your gold watch worth $100 if it's a cheap gold watch. No, you can give him just loads and stacks of bran, as long as it equals $100. So Abaya couldn't reconcile these two pesukim. It seems that why, when it comes to land, which is a very good item, everybody likes land, does the Torah demand the best? And when it comes to your movable items, if you want to pay him back with your movable items, there the Torah doesn't say you have to give the best. You can give any type of movable that you can. So here's the conflict then. Once we move Meitav throughout the Nezikin, it crashes into the concept of Kesev, and then crashes into the concept of Shaveh Kesev in this pasuk of Bor. And now we have three different elements of payment. Two of them which Abaya cannot reconcile. You have to give the best of your land, but if you want to pay him in metaltalin, you can give him the worst of your metaltalin. That was Abaya's rumia, his contradiction that he saw, and apparent contradiction in the Torah. Now, very important to note that for us, difficulties or contradictions are a way to understanding the Torah. Normally, when a person speaks, if he gives testimony and he says one thing and then he says the opposite thing, or then we say, wait a minute, there's something strange here. So either he can explain himself or he's lying. But when it comes to the Torah, we know that Torah is an integrated unit, but we want to understand how the parts flow together. How do they integrate? And this is the question of Abaya. Now, the Gemara now presents Abaya's answer, which it rejects. Then it gives Rava's example, which it rejects. And finally, the fourth example, it does not reject. What's this fourth example? It says, Ki ase Rav Papa, Rav Huna Rav Yeshua, Mibei Rav Pershua. These two great rabbis explained the seeming contradiction to these two pesukim. How did they do it? They said, Kol mile meitavhu. All movables are really called meitav. You thought that what? That subin is not called the best. You thought it was called the worst of your property. You thought the best was land, and maybe then your gold watch, and then at the end of the line was your subin. He says, no, actually, I'm going to show you that really subin, which is this brand, is actually called meitav also. Why? In what bechina is it called meitav? In what aspect? Remember, the Ramchal always asks us to investigate statements in terms of their bechina, their aspect. So in which aspect can you attach this word meitav, meaning the best, to subin, which seems to be the worst? Why? You know, it is the best, he says. Why? Di'ilo mizdaben hacha mizdaben mamasa achrise. Because when it comes to movable objects, if you can't find someone to buy it here, then you could just pick yourself up and go somewhere else and find a better price for it. So it does have buyers. But what happens with land? Labamiara, land is, the category of land is not called good, meitav. Why? The leisev le meitav. There, you have to give the best because kihechi de lichpots ala zvine. Because there, the Torah realizes there's very few buyers. So in the aspect of, will you be able to find a buyer for property or for metaltalin? Well, property has fewer buyers. They really, usually only the people who are located in that area. Well, nowadays, you can buy property in broader areas and countries, but usually people are interested in the property that's near them. They want to expand their property, and they know what the property is like. So usually you'll find the most amount of buyers interested in the area that you're located in. If you don't find buyers there, then you're stuck with this land. You may need the land, but you may not want the land. Maybe you just want the $100 so you can buy yourself a new cow, whatever was destroyed. So the Torah says, what's this explanation? Why do you have to give the best of your land? Because with the land, you're not going to be able to convert it into money very easily. You may be, but if the Torah would let you give the worst land, then you'd really, really have few buyers. As it is, you have a small set of buyers around you. But the Torah wants those buyers to be excited. So you give the person who you damage the best of your land, so there the buyers around will be highly motivated to buy that land. So when it comes to money, if you don't find a buyer here, good. Excuse me, metaltalin, if you don't find a buyer here, you'll find it some other place. There's always buyers around. You move it, but land is not movable. In the bechina of its movability, in that aspect, land is immobile, and therefore the people who are potential buyers are limited, much less than metaltalin, which you can find all the buyers you want. So the Torah says, give the best of your land so that the buyers, who are fewer in number, will jump at it. Those buyers will jump on it. And that's what Reb Papa says. Now, the Gemara then goes through many questions about how land is evaluated. Okay, now again, although this piece is very, very broad, I'm trying to narrow our scope just for our introduction, okay? So the Gemara now goes and discusses many, many issues of how do you evaluate damage. This Gemara was found on Daf Zion Ahmed Beit. Then when we go down after this whole discussions about how do you evaluate land, what happens if people sell land and the buyers are coming to take the land away from the person who bought it, and it has a lien on it. So the Gemara then goes through Ches Amud Beis. Finally, on Tes Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, he makes a statement, and he talks about Kesef and Meitav. Up to this point with Abaya, we were having a problem with what? With Meitav and Metaltalin, movables and the best of your land. Reb Huna adds the third element into our equation, Kesef. And he says you either have to, you can give Kesef or Meitav. Now, we'll be entering into this statement rather deeply, but again, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So he adds the other element, Kesef. So they say to him, the Gemara asks, Esave, Rav Nachman or Rav Huna, wait a minute, how could you say that the only possibilities to pay is Kesef and Meitav? There's a third possibility because we learned Yashiv, that word Yashiv in Bor comes to tell us that you can even give Shavik Kesef. There's a metalton, the third element. Okay, it feels subin, even the worst of your metalton, and the worst of your movables. So he answers them, Hacha Mayaskinon Idalesle. Idalesle. Okay. Excuse me, that was wrong. It goes there. So if you don't have Kesef and Meitav, then he says you can give the third element. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, that's obvious. If you don't have, you have to pay with, the man wants to be paid for his damage. If you don't have money or land, so of course you have to pay whatever you have to give. You have to pay back for the damage. So the Gemara says, no. Mount the same amrin zil tarich uzdavin va'aisele kesef. No, you might think if he's going to, and get the money and bring it back to me. Don't let me, I'm the poor guy who was damaged, have to now take all your subin and go sell it to get my money back. That's what he says. So Kamashmalan, no. The Torah says when you do have to give payback and you don't have money and land, you have to give subin. At that point, you, the person who was damaged, have to run around and get your money back with the subin. Okay, so those are the three elements. Those are the two Gemaras that we're going to have to integrate. We're going to have to talk about. Our piece will be how to integrate what Rev Papa said with Rev Huna. Where do they argue, where they don't argue? Are they arguing, are they not arguing? The two Gemaras go together. All these questions we're going to investigate. But here, we see that there's three elements that come into conflict. And we're going to have to, we see the Gemara is handling those three elements. The question is how they do it. So now let's go back to our chart and see the level of the posting. Now, I keep mentioning because it's obvious that we're going to have to study this more carefully. And there's a lot of work to do. But I would like to give the general overview before we jump into a deep analysis. So the poskim here, which means the Rishonim and the poskim, what's it mean, Rishonim and poskim? Rishonim are people who talk directly on the Gemara, who lived at a certain period of time, in the 1100s basically. But both of these Rishonim and poskim, both of them lived at the same time. They're all, here's the dates if you want, some of the people that we had. Nowadays we can find everything. So, where did I put it? Okay. The people we're going to talk about are this set of people. Okay? Okay, let's just put that there. We're going to talk about the Rif. Now, the Rif, we said, was the first one to abandon the direct format of the Gemara. In other words, people used to comment on the page itself. The Rif, what he did was make a kitzer, an abbreviated version of the Gemara, where he cuts out the back and forth argumentation and tries to pinpoint the results of the Gemara. That's why he's called a posek. His aim is to show us what to do. Okay, not, it used to be people would learn the Gemara themselves and would learn the give and take, and after the give and take in the Gemara, the debating process, they would understand the conclusion and they would do what the conclusion was. The Rif found, of course, that in his generation, he lived from 1113 to 1103. What he did is he cut out the give and take of the Gemara and he wrote down conclusions. Now, he doesn't only do that, he also explains. But that's his basic format. He was the first one, I would say, to go off the page of the Gemara and not to explain what's written there, but to make an abbreviated text. After him, of course, we're going to discuss the Rif, of course, was a Sephardic scholar. The next person we're going to talk about, and he's not a posek, he explains the Gemara is the famous Rashi, Reb Shlomo ben Yitzchak. He lives from 1141 of 1040, 1041 to 1100. So he overlaps more or less the time of the Rif. The Rabbeinu Tam, the grandson of Rashi, writes a commentary on the Gemara, but what he does is spell out the Gemara in terms of all of Shas. Whereas Rashi explains to you what's here, and again, these are just general rules. I mean, everyone does everything, but generally Rashi wants to tell you what's happening on the page. Going down the page in each step of the argumentation, what is happening here? He's a mafarish. He explains what's happening here. His grandson, Rabbeinu Tam, who has a yeshiva with 70 great chachamim, each one a master of not only all of Shas, but particularly of each one of Shas, each one of the Masechtas, he stands up and he's the Rosh Yeshiva in front of those 70 people, and they fire questions from him from all over the Shas, from all over the Talmud. And he explains how those texts interact. So that's called Rabbeinu Tam. At the same period of time here, 1138 to 1204, is the Nesher HaGadol, the great eagle, the Rambam. Now the Rambam is in the Sephardic tradition. He's following the Rif, but he goes one step further than the Rif, where the Rif, who he met as a very old man when when he was passing away, his father brought him to him, but he couldn't be here. It says 103. Okay, the dates are problematic here. I remember that he did get a bracha from the Rif, but here it says he died 30 years or 35 after. It's inconsequential. The point is here that in style, what the Rambam does is go a step further than the Rif, which instead of the Rif, who followed the format of the Mishnah and the Talmud, just made a abbreviated version, the Rambam takes the whole Talmud and reorganizes it into his Mishnah Torah, into a new compilation completely. Because he does that and he doesn't show us how he gets to his results, it caused a rather big stir in the Torah world. A lot of problems. However, when we talk about the poskim, the Rambam is one of the giants of the poskim, one of the giants of the people who tell us what the halacha is. We'll also be handling in this particular piece a person called the Ramah, who's lived about the period of the Rambam, a little later. We'll see his position, and finally, Rabbeinu Asher. Rabbeinu Asher, who follows these great Tekufa, this great period of the Rishonim, will use them as his texts and explain to us each one of their position, not necessarily all of them. In this text he speaks about 4 of them, 3 of them actually. And then he explains to us why each one picked his position and what the halacha is. His son, the Rosh, which is the next generation, the son of the Rosh, the Tur, writes a Shulchan Aruch, where he, like the Rambam, writes a text which is not on the Gemara itself. It's a new text called the Tur Shulchan Aruch, and it only deals with halacha l'maisa. Unlike the Rambam's text, which dealt with all sorts of halachas, the Tur concentrated on 4 areas: the holidays, and the Torah Chaim, and all the laws of marriage and divorce in Nashim, and Choshen Mishpat, all the laws of business, and Yeridea, all the laws of kashrus. So he made a compilation of the halachas that we do, and all the halachas of the base of Mikdash, which the Rambam put in, he did not concern us with. Okay, then we're going. So those are the Rishonim and the Poskim. So in this particular piece, we see that there's differences in how these great Rishonim and Poskim explain that Gemara that we just looked at in brief. And here's basically what they said. Again, I added in the text last week, you said let's read it inside. I'd like to do that in the second stage. I'd like to go, when we go deeper into the piece, when we first analyze the Torah ourselves and go through the Mishnah, then go step by step, we'll go deeper into each piece. But this is an overview. Okay, so the Rif's position is that Kesef and Subin are equal, and they're both equal to Meitav, which means, and then the halacha is like Rav Papa. So the way he learns Rav Papa, if you remember, the question of Abaya was, how can you give how can toward the man the best of your land, and when you give Metalton, you give you the absolutely worst. So he showed us how Subin, or Metalton, is really called Meitav also. So you're really giving Meitav. And of course, Kestiv is always called the best, because the way he understands Rav Papa is, what you want as a person who was damaged is really to buy your new cow. You don't want to start having to get the other person's property and selling it, or the other person's movable property and selling it. You really just want your object back. So the best thing to give is Kesef. So Rav Papa says that all these three things are, you'll be able to get your money back. Because Subin, although it's not the money, you can easily find buyers, if not here, somewhere else. Meitav, Karka, people will be jumping at an opportunity to buy your best of land, because that's always a valuable, it's always a valuable item. So according to the way Rick learns Rav Papa, you can give equally Kesef, Subin, and Meitav. Now the Rambam says different. We can look at the Rambam here. The Rambam says in Mishnah Torah, when the Beis Din wants to collect from the property of the person who did the damage, very unusual phrase. He says the first thing that they do is they go to the person's metaltalin. V'im lohai lo metaltalin klal of shalohai metaltalin keneged kol nizak. If the person doesn't have enough movable property, or doesn't have, metaltalin at all, or enough to pay all, then bovan hashan kark hamazik. Then you go to the last property of the badger, and you go from the rest of his land. So any time that the mazik has metaltalin, so you don't go to his land. Okay, so the Rambam holds that, of course, Kesef is the best. I mean, Kesef is, you can't say Kesef is worse than Subin. So he holds that Kesef and Subin, of course, you have Kesef, you can give Kesef. But if you don't have Kesef, then the Beis Din can collect from your movables. And only as a last resort does it go to your land. That's how the Rambam holds. So Kesef and Subin are equal, and Meitav is the last choice. So here we're going to discuss, when we're talking about the Achronim, there's difference of opinion who the Rambam is going like. Is he holding like Rev Huna, or he's holding like Rev Papa? So if he's holding Rav Papa, then Achlas David says that Rav Papa holds that that Kesef and Subin are the best, and Meitav comes in second place. Now, the Ramah, another Rishon who is a posek, says the following, and he's brought in the Ran. Let's see if we can find him here. He says, when we say that you can give even the worst of your metaltalin, when you don't have money, then you could give your movables. But once the person has money, you can't push him off and say, look, even though I have money, you go take my subin. Whereas these other poskim say that you can give either one, and the person has to accept it because they're both meitav. The Ramah says, no, kesef is the best. If you don't have kesef, then you give subin. And according to Nachal Sav, it was an Achron, which we'll investigate, so, and meitav is worse than subin. That's what he's going to say. So that will be his novel position, that the first thing you have to give is money. Then you can give money and the equivalent of money, and then finally you can give the best of your property. Finally, we have Rabbeinu Tam. Let's look at Rabbeinu Tam. Again, here's what Rabbeinu Tam says about Nizikin. He says, when it comes to the case of Nizikin, o Kesev, o Meitav. Your first choice as a payment for damage is Kesev or Meitav. V'ilei, and if you don't have Kesev or Meitav, so then you give Subin. So let's see if we wrote that right. He says Kesev or Meitav, and if you don't have Kesev or Meitav, then you give Subin, which seems like that's the halacha like Rav Papa. So here is the spread of Rishonim that speak about this din. We see that this whole group, that's the Rif and the Rambam, however we're going to explain it, they hold Kesef is equal to Subin, and, excuse me, that's not true. Rif holds, let's maybe be medayek. There's three groups here. There's one group, which is the Rif. He holds that all three things are equal. The mazik can pay back in Kesef Subin or the best of his land. The Rambam, however we're going to explain him, he says that you must give Kesef or Subin first, and if you don't have them, then you can give Meitav. Then we have the Ramah. He says, no, you have to give Kesef first, then Subin, and then Meitav. And finally, we have Rabbeinu Tam, who agrees, really. Excuse me, he says Kesef, his chiddush is that you have to give Kesef or Meitav, whereas the Rif and the Rambam says, no, you have to give Kesef or Subin first. He says Kesef or Meitav, and then if you don't have it, you give Subin. Okay, so that's the setup of the Rishonim, and as I said, we're going to investigate them. It's going to take us time until we clearly understand the situation, but we're giving a broad analysis. Now, what do the Achronim do? Now, we're going to skip a few generations here. We're not going to talk about the Shulchan Aruch, which we're going to get into with the Shach, Besvet Hashem. But at this point, I would like to just explain what the Achronim do. So we said, we quoted here the Vilna Gaon, for instance. He lived in the 1700s. His student, Chaim Volozhin, started the whole yeshiva system as we know it today. Okay, everybody used to learn Torah. They used to learn Torah in groups, but the formal educational system that we have today, with the building and the people and the Beis Midrash, and not that people didn't have base midrashim, but that the formal system was set up by his student Chaim Volozhin, and continues still today. So in the Chaim Volozhin, one of his students was a man called a06. We'll speak about him more at length later on. But he wants to explain the divergence. Now, why do these people say what they say? Okay, we know what they say, but the question is, how do they understand the Gemara so that they come to these various conclusions? And that's the work of a Rishon. In other words, we're going to see that every generation handles the material of the previous generation. And where the previous generation did not spell everything out because it was supposed to be understood, the next generation spells out more of the details. So here we know what the Rishonim look at the Gemara, and they look at this machlokas between Rev Papa and Rev Huna, and they analyze the Gemara, and they come to their conclusions, each one with their own conclusions. They don't necessarily tell us how they got there. So the Achronim come, and they're going to now explain to us how this halacha was derived. What did the people see to say? Now remember, the Rif only says a kitzer, gives you a brief summation of the Gemara. The Rambam doesn't even tell you where he comes from. He just tells you what the halacha is. The Ramah we have in the Ran, we just have a text of what he says, what the situation is, and Rabbeinu Tam does spell out more what he says. So the Nachlas David now is going to explain to us on what basis these Rishonim disagree with each other. Okay.
So when do you want to start from the?
The Nachlas David has a very
Yeah. When do you want to? I'm sort of like getting lost, and all the back and forth.
You're getting lost.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do this one last little piece
with
you, and then that'll be the end.
Okay.
The end of the discussion. It's much too much information, right?
Right. Without starting at the basics. No, I don't have the foundation.
You have to start build from the bottom up. Okay. So this will be my last hit at this, and this we're going to start from the bottom up. Okay. I just want to have it recorded, just to say if someone wants to get the broad overview of what we're doing.
Okay. Fine.
And then from now on, we're going to start the next class. We're going to start from the Torah itself. We're not going to miss any steps. We're going to go from the Torah to the Mishnah to the Gemara. We're going to see everything. Okay. Right now, I agree. It's a lot of information. I just wanted to give a general. What happens is, if we go into depth, then although every step will be clear, we won't understand where we're going. So my point here is to show a demonstration piece to show where we started, where the difficulties arose, and where we're going to solve those difficulties. So in other words, we started with the pasuk of Meitav. We found it in one place. We saw that the Gemara expanded it throughout the place, through all these 28 different types of damages. We saw there's a conflict between Kesev and Meitav. And then we saw the Gemara also adds that there's another case that we need, which is Shava Kesev. And now the Rishonim are going to have to explain, excuse me, that was a bias question. And then we had two basic alternatives to how to explain it. And then we're going to now see how the Rishonim, this is where we're holding now, handle those two Gemaras. Now, I agree with you, it's very quick and there's like a lot of information here. But if you just grant me this last time, and this is it, from here we're going to go to basics, okay? But I just didn't want to, I don't want to get into the basics before we have a broad overview, even though it's quite a complex piece. So this is our last stop, which is an analysis of how each one of these people came to their conclusion. Okay, so I'm only going to talk about the conclusions here, okay, and explain the syllogisms of how we got there. Okay, very simply, there's nothing simple, but that's what it is. Let's start with Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam is going to hold that you can give all three things. That's not true. Okay. The Rabbeinu Tam is going to hold that Rav Papa holds you can give all three things equally. Okay. In the end, he's going to pasak like Rav Huna that you have to give Kesev and Meitav first, and then Subin second. The Machlokus is going to be is going to derive to put the difficulty here, or the explanation here, is going to be with the Gemara in Kesubas. Gemara in Kesubas says that money is better than metaltalin. Okay, so he's going to say that Kesef, excuse me, yeah, you have to, money's the best. So he says no, Kesef, and he's going to say Kesef is equal to Meitav and Subin is equal to Kesef, and therefore all three things are equal. The Ramah is going to say that Kesef is better than Meitav because he's going to learn from Kesuvas, and Subin is less than Kesef because even though the pasuk said Kesef and it included Shaveh Kesef, he's going to say this, you can actually have a ribui that means that what's not mentioned and included is less, and therefore he's going to say that Subin is less than Kesef and Subin is less than Meitav, so Meitav is less than Subin is less than Kesef. Okay. I'm going very quickly, and I'm going to give you the sheet anyway, but I just wanted to show this broad overview, even though it's very, very brief and very hard to hop all the time. Okay, the Rambam is going to say that Kesef is less than Meitav, which we're going to learn from Subis, and Subin equals Kesef, because the ribui, when you say Yashiv, it means equality. So Subin is less than Meitav, and therefore Subin is less than Meitav, and it's also less than Kesef. Excuse me, Subin is equal to Kesef, but less than Meitav. That's what he's going to hold. Okay, so let's stop here because I know that it's we've gone way beyond what we're going to do, where our plan is. Let's start now from the beginning, okay? And start from David Reed, which is the beginning of Mishpatim, and you can always get the digital stuff. What I did was very simply, I just broke everything up into subject and predicate. In other words, what the din is, and then I just put a tab on what the predicate is. That's how I'm going to start. So next week we're going to look at the Chumash itself. We're going to analyze what we can learn from the Chumash. What is the general order? Like we said here, it's talking about a case and a law, a nosei and a mishpat, a nosei and a nasu. We're going to ask ourselves questions: what is the relationship of each one of these things? Okay, why did this come first and this comes second? What's switched in each one of these cases? Okay, and so that will be our work for next week. And if you can just get yourself a digital text, from wherever you can get them, they're all over the place.
Right. Okay.
And then I want you to do it. Okay, I did because I'm sitting here doing it, but it doesn't help you too much. So what I want you to do is to break it down into the case and the law, the nosei, the nasu, and then think about what is the organization of the Chumash itself, and where are the unstated questions. Now, I would also ask you to do one more thing to think about. Integrate the Sefer Gayon, and Derek Tfunos. The Sefer Gayon, they talk about a poel, a person that does an activity, the person who receives the activity, the nifal, the echos of the maisa, the mechaber or the mikrim. Okay, think about how you would integrate that into these raw pesukim.
Okay, that's
your homework.
Well, that's what I want to get to also, was taking this, what we learned, and bringing it back. It was so for the introduction.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with what we learned.
Okay. It only has to do with, exactly, an introduction.
Right.
Because what we learned now is now going to take the Ramchal system, and now we're going to apply it to what we learned, and to see what we've gained by what we've learned.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Beseda. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry
Very
I'm
good.
talking so
No
long, but
problem.
I just had to get through that. That's
Okay.
once that's gone now. Next week it's you and the Pacific.
Good.
Okay?
All right. So see you next week
Okay.
in Hashem.
Okay. Be well.
Okay. Goodbye.